A homeless man showed up at my father's funeral. Dirty clothes, smell of alcohol, long beard. Everyone was uncomfortable. The funeral director tried to ask him to leave, said this was a private service. The homeless man said he had a right to be there, said he knew my father. We'd never seen him before, never heard my father mention anyone like him. The man sat in the back. People whispered, made disgusted faces, moved away from him. After the service, the man approached me, said he was sorry for my loss, said my father was a good man. I asked how he knew my father. He said they'd been friends for 40 years. I said that was impossible. My father would never be friends with a homeless man, would never associate with someone like him. The man just nodded, said he understood, said people always judged. Then he handed me an envelope, said my father had asked him to give it to me, said to read it when I was alone. The man left. I opened the envelope later. Inside was a letter from my father. The letter said the homeless man was his brother, my uncle, a man I'd been told died before I was born, but he hadn't died. He'd had a mental breakdown in his 30s, had ended up on the streets, had been homeless for 40 years, and my father had been taking care of him the entire time, had been giving him money, food, clothes, had been visiting him every week for 4 decades, had kept it secret because he was ashamed. The man I'd judged, the man I'd treated with disgust, the man I'd wanted removed from the funeral, was family, was my uncle, was someone my father had loved and cared for his entire adult life, and I'd been cruel to him, without knowing the truth. Before we get into how this story began, I need to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments right now, just your city, because what happened to me, this lesson about judgment and truth and family secrets, it's something we all need to hear. We all judge people by how they look, by what they appear to be, without knowing their stories, without understanding the truth. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be told. Stories that challenge our assumptions. Stories that show us the danger of judging too quickly. Stories that remind us that everyone has a story we don't know. Now let me tell you how I learned the hardest lesson of my life. How I discovered that the homeless man I'd been disgusted by was family. And how my father had been hiding a secret for 40 years that changed everything I thought I knew about him. My name is Marcus. I'm 48 years old. My father died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack. He was 73, had been healthy, active, no warning, just collapsed one morning in his kitchen. Was gone before the ambulance arrived. The funeral was on a Saturday. Small service, family and close friends, maybe 40 people. Normal funeral, normal grief, normal goodbye to a man who'd lived a long, good life. My father had been a pharmacist, owned his own pharmacy for 35 years, retired 10 years ago, sold the business, lived comfortably on his savings and Social Security. He'd been married to my mother for 50 years before she died 6 years ago. They'd had 3 children, me, my sister Janet, my brother Robert. Normal family, normal life. Nothing remarkable. Nothing that would suggest secrets. Nothing that would suggest my father had been hiding something for 40 years. The funeral was at a chapel near my father's house. We'd arranged everything quickly, picked out a casket, wrote an obituary, invited people, standard procedure for death, standard rituals for grief, everything normal. Everything expected, everything following the script everyone follows when someone dies. I arrived early, helped arrange flowers, greeted people as they came in. My sister Janet was there with her husband. My brother Robert came with his wife and kids, friends from the pharmacy, people from my father's church, neighbors, everyone dressed appropriately, everyone somber, everyone there to pay respects to a man they'd known and liked. The service was scheduled to start at 11. By 10:45, most people had arrived, were sitting in pews, waiting for the service to begin. I was standing near the entrance greeting late arrivals when I saw him, a homeless man, walking up the sidewalk toward the chapel. He was maybe 65 or 70. Hard to tell with homeless people. They age differently, look older than they are. This man had long gray hair, long gray beard, both matted and dirty. He wore layers of clothes, all filthy, all worn, all looking like they'd been picked from dumpsters. He smelled, could smell him from 10 feet away. Alcohol, sweat, street, the smell homeless people have, the smell that makes you want to move away, want to avoid, want to not breathe. The man walked right up to the chapel entrance, started to come inside. The funeral director stepped forward, put his hand up, said in a low voice that this was a private service, that he'd need to leave. The homeless man looked at the funeral director, said he had a right to be there, said he knew the deceased, said he needed to pay his respects. The funeral director looked uncomfortable, looked at me. I shook my head. I'd never seen this man before in my life, had no idea who he was, had no idea how he could have known my father. My father was a respected businessman, a church-going man, a family man. He didn't associate with homeless people, didn't have friends who lived on the streets. This man was clearly confused, clearly had the wrong funeral, clearly didn't belong here. The funeral director told the man again that he needed to leave, that this was a private service for family and friends. The homeless man stood his ground, said he was a friend, said he'd known the deceased for 40 years, said he had every right to be here. His voice was getting louder. People inside were starting to notice, starting to turn around, starting to see the commotion at the entrance. I stepped forward, told the man directly that he needed to leave, that he didn't know my father, that he was confused, that he needed to go. The man looked at me, looked me right in the eyes, said, "You must be Marcus. You look just like your daddy did at your age." That stopped me. How did he know my name? How did he know what my father looked like when he was younger? I asked him how he knew who I was. He said my father had told him about me, had shown him pictures, had talked about his children all the time. I said that was impossible. My father would never have been friends with someone like him, would never have associated with a homeless person, would never have shown him family photos. The man just nodded slowly, said he understood, said people always judged, said people always assumed, said people never knew the whole story. Then he walked past me, walked right into the chapel, found a seat in the very back pew. As far from everyone else as possible, I wanted to have him removed, wanted to call the police, have him escorted out, but the service was starting. People were watching. Making a bigger scene would be worse than just letting him sit there. I told the funeral director to keep an eye on him, make sure he didn't cause any trouble. The funeral director nodded, looked unhappy about it, but agreed. The service began. The pastor spoke, read scripture, talked about my father's life, his pharmacy, his service to the community, his family, his faith. Normal funeral service, normal eulogy, normal remembrances. I was sitting in the front row with Janet and Robert. Could feel people's eyes on the back of my neck. Knew they were looking at the homeless man. Knew they were uncomfortable. Knew they were judging him, judging us for letting him stay, wondering who he was, why he was there, why we hadn't removed him. Janet leaned over during a hymn, whispered asking who that man was. I said I didn't know, said he'd claimed to know Dad, said he'd refused to leave. Janet looked disgusted, said we should have called the police, said this was disrespectful, said Dad would have been horrified to have someone like that at his funeral. Robert agreed, said we should have the man removed as soon as the service ended, before people went to the cemetery, before he could follow us there and cause more problems. The service lasted about an hour. Normal length, normal structure. When it ended, people filed past the casket, paid their last respects, then moved toward the exits, planning to drive to the cemetery for the burial. I watched the homeless man. He stayed seated, waiting for everyone else to leave. When the chapel was mostly empty, he stood, walked slowly to the casket, stood looking down at my father's body for a long time, maybe 5 minutes, just standing there, looking, his lips moving slightly, like he was praying or talking, saying goodbye. Then he turned, walked toward me. I tensed, ready to tell him not to come to the cemetery, ready to tell him his presence here had been inappropriate enough. But he didn't ask about the cemetery, just walked up to me, said again that he was sorry for my loss, said my father was a good man, said he'd miss him. I asked again how he knew my father. The man said they'd been friends for 40 years, since they were young men. I said that couldn't be true, said my father's friends were respectable people, were business owners and church members and family men, were not homeless people who showed up drunk at funerals. The man didn't get angry, didn't argue, just nodded, said he understood why I felt that way, said most people would feel the same. Then he reached into one of his many pockets, pulled out an envelope, dirty envelope, creased and worn, like it had been carried around for a while. He handed it to me, said my father had given it to him 2 weeks ago, had asked him to give it to me after he died, had said it was important, had said I needed to read it, had said it would explain everything. I took the envelope, didn't want to touch it, didn't want to touch anything this man had touched, but I took it. The man said I should read it when I was alone, when I had time to process it, said it would be difficult, said it would change how I thought about my father, said it would change how I thought about a lot of things. Then he left, just walked out of the chapel, down the sidewalk, disappeared around a corner, gone. Janet came over, asked what the man had wanted, what he'd given me. I showed her the envelope. She made a face, said I should throw it away, said it was probably some scam, some homeless person who'd read the obituary, who'd shown up hoping to get money, who'd made up some story about knowing Dad, who'd left some fake letter asking for cash. She said I shouldn't even open it, should just throw it away and forget about it. But something made me keep it. Something about the way the man had looked at me, the way he'd said my name, the way he'd known what my father had looked like when he was my age. Something that made me think maybe he wasn't lying. Maybe he did know my father. Maybe there was something in this envelope I needed to see. We went to the cemetery. The burial was brief. More prayers, more scripture, lowering the casket, throwing dirt, standard rituals, standard goodbye, then to my father's house for food and fellowship, people bringing casseroles and condolences, standing around talking about Dad, telling stories, remembering. Normal post-funeral gathering, normal grieving process. I kept thinking about the envelope, kept thinking about the homeless man, kept wondering who he was, how he'd known my father, what was in the letter. By evening, most people had left, just family remained, helping clean up, sorting through things, beginning the process of dealing with Dad's estate. I went to my father's bedroom, sat on his bed, pulled out the envelope. The envelope had my name written on it, my father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. The careful letters, the neat script, definitely my father's writing. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages, also in my father's handwriting, dated 2 weeks before he died, like the homeless man had said, written 2 weeks ago, given to the homeless man with instructions to give it to me after he died. I started reading. The letter began, "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've met my brother Thomas. I know what you're thinking. I know what you saw, a homeless man, dirty, drunk, embarrassing. I know you judged him. I know you were disgusted by him. I know you wanted him gone from my funeral. I understand. That's how most people react. That's how I used to react before I understood, before I knew his story, before I knew the truth. But Thomas is your uncle, my brother, and I need you to understand who he is, why he's the way he is, and what I've been doing for the past 40 years. I stopped reading, looked up, processing what I'd just read. The homeless man was my uncle, my father's brother, but I'd been told my whole life that Dad was an only child, that he had no siblings, that he'd grown up alone. I'd never heard of any uncle, never heard the name Thomas, never had any indication my father had a brother. I kept reading. The letter continued. I told you I was an only child because I was ashamed of Thomas, ashamed of what happened to him, ashamed of having a brother who was homeless and mentally ill, ashamed of what people would think, of what people would say, of how it would reflect on me, on our family, on you and Janet and Robert. I told you he was dead because it was easier than explaining, easier than dealing with people's judgment, easier than having to acknowledge that my brother lived on the streets while I lived comfortably. I told myself I was protecting you, protecting the family, protecting our reputation, but I was really protecting myself, protecting my image, protecting my pride. I felt my chest tighten. My father had lied to us, had hidden his brother, had pretended Thomas was dead, had kept this secret for our entire lives. Why? What had happened? What was so shameful that Dad had erased his own brother from family history? The letter explained. Thomas and I grew up together. He was 2 years older. We were close. Best friends, did everything together. Thomas was brilliant, smarter than me, got better grades, had bigger dreams. He went to college, got a degree in engineering, got a good job, got married, had everything going for him. Then when he was 33, something broke, something in his brain. He had a mental breakdown, started hearing voices, started having delusions, started acting strange, got diagnosed with schizophrenia, severe case, paranoid type. He lost his job, lost his wife, lost his apartment, lost everything. I kept reading. The letter described how Thomas had ended up on the streets, how the mental illness had made him unable to hold a job, unable to maintain relationships, unable to function in normal society, how he'd refused treatment, refused medication, believed the doctors were trying to control his mind, believed the hospital was part of a conspiracy, believed taking medication would let them win, how he'd chosen to live on the streets rather than accept help, rather than take medication, rather than admit he was sick. My father wrote, I tried to help, tried to get him into treatment, tried to force medication, tried to have him committed, but he'd run away, would disappear for months, would show up dirty and sick and worse than before. Eventually, I realized I couldn't force him, couldn't make him accept help he didn't want. All I could do was be there, be his brother, make sure he had food, had clothes, had someone who cared. The letter described 40 years of weekly visits, My father would find Thomas wherever he was living, under bridges, in parks, in abandoned buildings, would bring him food, would bring him clothes, would give him money, would sit with him and talk, would listen to his paranoid delusions, would not argue, would not judge, would just be there, be family, be the only person who hadn't abandoned him. My father wrote, "I never told you about Thomas because I was ashamed that my brother was homeless, ashamed that people would judge our family, ashamed that you might think less of me, might think I wasn't successful enough, wasn't respectable enough, might question our standing in the community. I told myself I was protecting you from the stigma, from the questions, from the judgment, but I was really protecting myself, protecting my image, protecting my reputation as a successful businessman, as a respected member of the community. I sacrificed my brother's dignity, erased him from family history, pretended he was dead, so I could maintain my image, so people would think I came from a good family, so no one would know the truth. I felt sick, felt disgusted, but not with Thomas, with myself, with how I'd treated him at the funeral, with how I'd looked at him, with what I'd thought, with what I'd said. I'd been cruel to my own uncle, had wanted him removed, had been embarrassed by him, had judged him exactly the way my father had feared being judged, had proven why my father had kept the secret, because people like me couldn't see past appearances, couldn't see past dirt and smell and mental illness, couldn't see the person underneath. The letter continued. Thomas came to see me 2 weeks ago. This was unusual. Usually I went to him, but he came to my house, said he'd had a feeling, said he knew something was going to happen to me, said he wanted to talk. We sat in my kitchen for 3 hours. Longest conversation we'd had in years. Thomas's mind was clearer than usual. He talked about our childhood, about our parents, about the good years before the illness, about his regrets, about his life, about choices he'd made, about paths not taken. My father wrote about that final conversation, about how Thomas had told him not to be ashamed anymore, had said it was okay, had said he understood why Dad had hidden him, had said he didn't blame him, had forgiven him for the lies, for the erasure, for the pretending he was dead. Thomas had said he just wanted Dad to know he'd appreciated the visits, the food, the clothes, the money, the fact that someone had cared, someone had not completely abandoned him, someone had been family even when it was hard, even when it was shameful, even when it meant hiding the relationship from everyone else. The letter said, Thomas asked me to tell you the truth after I died, asked me to write this letter, asked me to have him give it to you. He said you needed to know. Janet needed to know. Robert needed to know. You needed to know you had an uncle. Needed to know the truth. Needed to understand that mental illness can happen to anyone. That homeless people are people. That everyone has a story. That you shouldn't judge. Shouldn't assume. Shouldn't treat people as less than human because of how they look, or where they live, or what circumstances have brought them to where they are. I was crying now. Crying for Thomas. Crying for my father, crying for the 40 years of secrecy, crying for the shame that had kept a brother hidden, crying for my own judgment, my own cruelty, my own failure to see a human being beneath the dirt and smell and appearance. The letter ended. Marcus, I'm asking you to do what I should have done 40 years ago. Acknowledge Thomas. Acknowledge that he's family. Acknowledge that he matters. Don't hide him. Don't be ashamed of him. Don't treat him as less than human because of his illness, because of his circumstances, because of how he lives. He's your uncle, he's family, and he deserves better than I gave him, better than hiding, better than lies, better than shame. Please, do better than I did, be better than I was. See Thomas for who he is, not what he appears to be, not where he lives, not how he looks, but who he is. Your uncle, my brother, family, I love you. I'm sorry I lied. I'm sorry I taught you to be ashamed of family. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth while I was alive. Do better, please. For Thomas, for yourself, for the family. Don't judge books by their covers. Don't assume appearances tell the whole story. Don't treat people as less than human. Please, your father. I sat there holding the letter, crying, understanding, feeling ashamed, feeling guilty, feeling like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. I'd been cruel to my uncle, to family, to someone my father had loved and cared for 40 years. I'd judged him, dismissed him, wanted him gone, all because of how he looked, what he appeared to be, without knowing anything about him, without knowing his story, without seeing him as human. I went to find Janet and Robert. They were in the kitchen. packing up food. I showed them the letter, made them read it, watched their faces change as they understood, as they realized what we'd done, how we'd treated our uncle, how we'd failed him just like Dad had failed him by hiding him. We'd been taught to be ashamed of family, taught that appearances mattered more than truth, taught that reputation was more important than people. And we'd absorbed that lesson, had internalized it, had proven it at Dad's funeral by how we'd treated Thomas. Janet started crying, said she felt sick, said she'd been disgusted by Thomas, had wanted him removed, had thought terrible things about him. Now, knowing he was family, knowing he was sick, knowing he'd been our father's brother for 40 years, it changed everything, changed how she felt, changed what she'd done, changed the cruelty of her judgment. Robert said we needed to find Thomas, needed to apologize, needed to acknowledge him as family, needed to do what Dad had asked. Be better, do better, not hide him, not be ashamed, accept him as family despite his illness, despite his circumstances, despite how he lived. We spent the next 3 days searching, asking at shelters, at soup kitchens, at places homeless people gathered, asking if anyone knew Thomas, if anyone had seen him, if anyone knew where he stayed. Finally, someone at a shelter said they knew him, said he usually slept under a bridge near the river, said he'd been there for years. Same spot, same routine. Predictable, despite the mental illness. We found the bridge, found the area underneath where homeless people camped, found Thomas sitting against a concrete pillar, same dirty clothes, same matted beard, same smell, but seeing him differently now, seeing family, seeing uncle, seeing someone who mattered, someone who deserved respect, someone who deserved better than judgment. Thomas looked up when we approached, recognized me, said, "You read the letter?" I said yes, said I was sorry for how I'd treated him at the funeral, sorry for judging him, sorry for wanting him removed, sorry for being cruel to family, sorry for not knowing, sorry for everything. Thomas said it was okay, said he understood, said people always judged, said he was used to it, said he didn't blame me, said I didn't know. How could I have known? My father had kept the secret, had hidden him, had made sure I never knew I had an uncle. Thomas said he didn't blame my father either, said mental illness was hard, said homelessness was shameful in people's eyes, said he understood why Dad had hidden him, had lied about him, had pretended he was dead. It was easier. It protected the family. It protected Dad's reputation. It made sense even if it hurt. I told Thomas we wanted to help, wanted to do what Dad had been doing, wanted to bring him food, clothes, money, wanted to visit, wanted to be family, wanted to acknowledge him, not hide him anymore, not be ashamed anymore, not treat him as something to be hidden. Thomas said that would be nice, said he'd appreciate it, said it had been lonely since Dad died, said 40 years of weekly visits, then suddenly nothing. He'd known Dad was gone, had felt it. That's why he'd gone to the funeral, to say goodbye, to pay respects, to honor the brother who'd never completely abandoned him, even when he'd hidden him from everyone else. Janet asked if Thomas would consider treatment, consider medication, consider getting help. Thomas said no, said he'd thought about it over the years, but he didn't trust it, didn't trust doctors, didn't trust medication, believed it would control his mind, would take away the part of him that was real, would make him into someone else. He preferred to live on the streets, preferred his freedom even with the voices, even with the paranoia, even with the delusions. It was his choice, his life, his decision. We had to respect it even if we didn't understand it, even if we wanted to help, even if we wanted to fix him. Robert asked what Thomas needed, what would help. Thomas said what Dad had been giving him, food, clothes when his wore out, a little money for necessities, but mostly just someone who acknowledged he existed. Someone who treated him like family. Someone who didn't pretend he was dead, didn't hide him, didn't act ashamed. Just someone who saw him, recognized him, treated him like he mattered. We made a schedule. Each of us would visit once a week, would bring food, would bring supplies, would sit and talk, would be family, would do what Dad had been doing, but without the shame, without the hiding, without the pretending. We'd tell our children about Uncle Thomas, would explain about mental illness, about homelessness, about how circumstances and illness can take anyone down, can leave anyone on the streets, can destroy anyone's life, would teach them not to judge, not to assume, not to treat homeless people as less than human, would teach them what we'd learned too late, what we'd learned only after being cruel, only after judging, only after proving exactly why Dad had kept the secret. I visited Thomas that first week, brought him food from a restaurant, sandwiches, soup, fruit, things that would last a few days. Also brought new socks, new jacket, some cash. Thomas accepted it gratefully. We sat under the bridge, talked. He told me about Dad, about their childhood, about growing up together, about the years before the illness, about who he'd been when he was young, when he was normal, when he had a future. Thomas had been an engineer, had worked on buildings, on bridges, had been good at it, had loved it, had seen his career stretching ahead. Then the voices started, the paranoia, the delusions. Everything fell apart. Wife left, job gone, apartment lost. Within 6 months, he'd been on the streets. Within a year, he'd been fully homeless, living under bridges, eating from dumpsters, surviving day to day. That had been 42 years ago. Most of his adult life spent homeless, spent sick, spent living in a reality no one else could see. A reality created by faulty brain chemistry, by neurons misfiring, by a mental illness that had stolen his life. I asked if he regretted not taking medication, not accepting treatment. Thomas thought about it, said maybe, said probably, but said he couldn't imagine being different than who he was. The voices were part of him now. The paranoia was familiar. The delusions were his reality. Taking medication would erase that, would make him someone else, someone he didn't know, someone he might not recognize. He preferred to be himself even if himself was broken, even if himself was sick, even if himself was living under a bridge. It was his identity, his reality, his life. I asked about the funeral, about why he'd come. Thomas said Dad had told him when he died, had said Thomas should come to the funeral, should show himself, should give me the letter, should make sure I knew the truth. Thomas had been reluctant, had known how people would react, had known he'd be judged, had known he'd be treated poorly, but he'd promised Dad, had promised to deliver the letter, had promised to give me the truth, so he'd come, had endured the judgment, the disgust, the cruelty, had sat through the service knowing everyone was staring, everyone was uncomfortable, everyone wanted him gone, had done it because Dad had asked, had done it because family mattered, even when family was ashamed of you, even when family pretended you were dead, even when family treated you like you didn't exist, you still showed up, still kept promises, still honored the relationship even when it was one-sided, even when it was hidden, even when it came with shame. I apologized again, said I was sorry for how I'd treated him. Thomas said to stop apologizing, said it was okay, said I'd learned, said that's what mattered, said Dad had spent 40 years hiding him, but in the end, Dad had told the truth, had written the letter, had asked Thomas to deliver it, had wanted me to know, had wanted the hiding to stop, had wanted Thomas acknowledged. Dad had failed for 40 years, but had tried to fix it at the end, had tried to undo the damage, had tried to give Thomas his place in the family even if it came too late. I visited Thomas every week for 6 months. Janet visited every week. Robert visited every week. We brought food, brought clothes, brought money, but mostly just brought ourselves, brought family, brought acknowledgement that Thomas existed, that he mattered, that he was one of us. We told our children about Uncle Thomas, explained about mental illness, about schizophrenia, about how the brain can break just like any other organ, about how sickness isn't weakness, about how homeless people are people, about how you can't judge someone by how they look, by where they live, by what circumstances have brought them to their current situation. My son asked why Uncle Thomas didn't just get help, just take medication, just get better. I explained it wasn't that simple, that mental illness affects how you think, affects what you believe, affects whether you can even recognize you're sick, that Thomas's paranoia made him believe treatment was dangerous, made him believe medication would control his mind, made him believe accepting help was surrendering to forces trying to harm him. His illness prevented him from accepting treatment for the illness. That was the cruel irony. The sick brain refused the cure because the sickness made it unable to recognize it needed curing. My daughter asked if we could bring Uncle Thomas to our house, let him shower, give him a bed, let him live with us. I said we'd offered, but Thomas had refused, had said he was more comfortable on the streets, had his spot, had his routine, had his freedom. Being indoors made him anxious, made him feel trapped, made the voices worse. He preferred outside, preferred the bridge, preferred the space, preferred his familiar territory even if it was concrete and cold and uncomfortable. It was his home, his choice, his life. We had to respect it even if we wanted something different for him. 6 months after the funeral, Thomas got sick. Pneumonia, common for homeless people, living outside, exposed to weather, compromised immune system. By the time we realized how sick he was, it was bad. We called an ambulance, had him taken to the hospital. The doctors said it was severe, said his lungs were badly infected, said he needed antibiotics, needed rest, needed treatment. But Thomas refused medication, said he didn't trust it, said they were trying to poison him, said he needed to leave, needed to get back to his spot, needed to go home. The doctors said he'd die without treatment, said the pneumonia would kill him, said he needed medication, needed to stay. Thomas said he'd rather die free than live controlled, rather die under his bridge than live in a hospital, rather die as himself than survive as someone medication made him. The doctors said they couldn't force treatment, said he had the right to refuse, said we should try to convince him, should make him understand, should make him accept help. We tried, all of us, sat with Thomas in the hospital room, begged him to take the medication, begged him to accept treatment, begged him to let the doctors help. Thomas said no, said he'd lived his life on his terms, would die on his terms too, would not surrender his autonomy, would not let fear of death make him compromise his beliefs, would not take medication he believed was harmful, even if refusing meant dying. It was his choice, his body, his life, his death. We stayed with him, all of us, Janet, Robert, me, our families, sat with Uncle Thomas as he died, held his hands, talked to him, told him we loved him, told him we were sorry for the years of hiding, sorry for the shame, sorry for the judgment, sorry we hadn't known him sooner, sorry Dad had kept him secret, sorry we'd been cruel at the funeral, sorry for everything. Thomas said it was okay, said he forgave us, said he understood, said family was complicated, said shame was powerful, said he didn't blame anyone, was just grateful we'd found each other eventually, was grateful for the 6 months of visits, of being acknowledged, of being family, of not being hidden anymore. It had meant everything, had made the last months of his life less lonely, had given him connection, had given him family, had given him what he'd been missing for 40 years. Thomas died 2 days later. Pneumonia took him. He was 75 years old, had spent 42 years homeless, had spent 42 years sick with schizophrenia, had spent 42 years hidden by my father, hidden by shame, hidden by fear of judgment, hidden by the belief that family secrets needed to stay secret, that mental illness was something to be ashamed of, that homeless relatives reflected poorly on successful families. That image mattered more than truth. That reputation mattered more than people. We held a funeral for Thomas, invited everyone, told everyone who he was, told everyone he was my father's brother, our uncle, a man who'd been hidden for 40 years, a man who'd lived on the streets because of mental illness, a man who deserved better than shame, better than hiding, better than being erased from family history. We told his story, told about the engineering degree, the career, the promise, the breakdown, the illness, the 40 years on the streets, the weekly visits from Dad, the secret relationship, the shame, the hiding, the final letter, the truth. People were shocked, had known my father for years, had never known he had a brother, had never suspected, had believed he was an only child, had accepted the lie because it had never been questioned. People said they were sorry, said if they'd known, they'd have helped, would have brought Thomas food, would have visited, would have done something, but they hadn't known. Because Dad had kept it secret, had hidden Thomas, had pretended he didn't exist, had chosen reputation over brother, had chosen image over family, had chosen comfort over truth. At the funeral, I spoke, told everyone about the homeless man who'd shown up at Dad's funeral, about how we'd judged him, about how we'd wanted him removed, about how we'd been disgusted by him, about how we'd treated him with cruelty, about how we'd failed to see him as human. Then told them about the letter, about learning he was family, about understanding what Dad had done, about the 40 years of hiding, about the shame that had kept a brother secret, about the lesson we'd learned too late. I said the point of Thomas's story wasn't just about him, wasn't just about our family, was about all of us, about how we judge people, about how we treat homeless people, about how we see someone dirty and smelly and assume we know their story, assume they're lazy, assume they're addicts, assume they deserve their circumstances, assume they're less than human, without knowing anything about them, without knowing their story, without understanding what brought them to where they are. I said Thomas had been an engineer, had been educated, had been successful, had been normal, Then his brain broke. Mental illness destroyed his life, destroyed his career, destroyed his family, destroyed his future, left him on the streets, left him sick, left him unable to function in normal society. That wasn't his fault, wasn't his choice, wasn't something he deserved, was just the cruelty of biology, the randomness of genetics, the tragedy of mental illness. I said every homeless person has a story, has a history, has a path that led them to the streets. Some are addicts, some are mentally ill, some have both, some had trauma, some had bad luck, some made bad choices, but all of them are human. All of them deserve dignity. All of them deserve to be treated with basic respect, not with disgust, not with judgment, not with cruelty, not with the assumption that they're less than us, that they don't matter, that they don't deserve kindness. I said I'd failed that test, had failed when I'd met Thomas at Dad's funeral, had looked at him and seen only dirt and smell, had seen only someone who didn't belong, someone who made me uncomfortable, someone I wanted gone, hadn't seen my uncle, hadn't seen family, hadn't seen a human being with a story, had just seen appearances and judged based on that, had proven exactly why Dad had hidden Thomas, because people like me couldn't see past the surface, couldn't see past circumstances, couldn't see the person underneath. I said I was ashamed of that, ashamed of how I'd treated Thomas, ashamed of what I'd thought, ashamed of what I'd said, ashamed that it took a letter from my dead father to make me see Thomas as human, as family, as someone who mattered. I should have seen that immediately, should have treated him with kindness regardless of who he was, should have shown basic human decency to someone at a funeral, but I hadn't, had failed, had been cruel, had proven I was exactly the kind of person who judged books by their covers, who assumed appearances told the whole story, who treated people as less than human based on how they looked. I said I was telling this story because I didn't want anyone else to fail the same test, didn't want anyone else to treat homeless people with disgust, didn't want anyone else to assume they knew someone's story based on appearances, didn't want anyone else to be cruel to someone who might be family, who might be sick, who might be suffering, who might be human just like them, but for circumstances beyond their control. I said the homeless man you pass on the street has a story, has a history, has a family somewhere, has people who might love them, might be someone's brother, someone's son, someone's father, someone's uncle, might have been successful once, might have had a career, might have had a family, might have had a future that got destroyed by illness or addiction or trauma or bad luck or circumstances that could happen to anyone, including you, including me, including anyone sitting in this church. I said, mental illness doesn't discriminate, addiction doesn't discriminate, trauma doesn't discriminate, bad luck doesn't discriminate. Anyone can end up homeless, anyone can end up sick, anyone can end up on the streets. It's not something that only happens to bad people, to weak people, to people who deserve it. It's something that happens to humans, to people with brains that break, to people with circumstances that overwhelm them, to people who need help but can't accept it, or can't access it, or can't afford it. I said we need to do better, need to see homeless people as human, need to treat them with dignity, need to stop judging, need to stop assuming, need to stop treating people as less than us because circumstances have put them in difficult places, need to show kindness, need to show compassion, need to see the person under the dirt, under the smell, under the circumstances, need to remember they're someone's family, someone's loved one, someone who matters to someone even if they seem to matter to no one. I said Thomas mattered to Dad who visited him every week for 40 years, mattered to us once we knew the truth, mattered to himself even when no one else acknowledged he existed. He was family, was human, was someone who deserved better than shame, better than hiding, better than being erased from family history, better than dying alone under a bridge. He'd gotten 6 months of acknowledgement at the end, 6 months of being family, 6 months of being seen. That wasn't enough. Should have been his whole life. Should have been 42 years of family supporting him, visiting him, acknowledging him, treating him with dignity despite his illness, despite his circumstances, despite the shame my father felt. I said Dad had failed Thomas, had chosen reputation over brother, had chosen image over truth, had chosen comfort over family, had hidden Thomas for 40 years because he was ashamed, because he was afraid of judgment, because he cared more about what people thought than about acknowledging his brother existed, That was wrong, was cruel, was the opposite of what family should do. But at the end, Dad had tried to fix it, had written the letter, had told the truth, had asked us to do better, to be better, to not hide Thomas anymore, to acknowledge him, to see him, to treat him as family. Dad had failed for 40 years, but had tried to make it right at the end. I said I was trying to honor that, trying to do what Dad had asked, be better, do better, not hide, not be ashamed, not treat family as something to be erased because of illness, because of circumstances, because of how it looked, because of what people would think. Instead, acknowledge, accept, include, treat with dignity, show compassion, be family regardless of circumstances. I said that's what I was asking everyone here to do, not just for Thomas, for every homeless person they encountered, every person on the streets, every person begging, every person sleeping on benches, every person who looked dirty and smelly and uncomfortable. See them as human. See them as someone's family. See them as people with stories, with histories, with circumstances that brought them to where they are. Don't judge. Don't assume. Don't treat them as less than human. Show kindness. Show compassion. Show basic human decency. You don't know their story. Don't know what brought them there. Don't know what they're dealing with. Don't know who they are underneath the circumstances. I said the homeless man at Dad's funeral was my uncle, was family, was someone who mattered, was someone who deserved better than I gave him, better than judgment, better than disgust, better than cruelty. He deserved kindness, deserved respect, deserved to be seen as human. I failed to give him that when I first met him. Failed the test. Proved I was exactly the kind of person who judges books by covers. But I learned the hard way. Learned through shame, learned through guilt, learned through understanding what I'd done, what I'd thought, what I'd said to family, to someone who mattered, to someone who deserved better. I said, don't make my mistake. Don't wait for a letter from a dead father to see homeless people as human. See them as human now, today. Every time you encounter them, every time you pass them on the street, every time you're uncomfortable around them, remember they're human. Remember they have stories. Remember they might be someone's family, someone's Thomas, someone who matters to someone even if they seem to matter to no one. Treat them with kindness, with dignity, with basic human decency. You don't have to give them money, don't have to solve their problems, don't have to fix their lives, just have to see them as human. Acknowledge they exist. Treat them with the respect every human deserves. That's all. That's the minimum. That's what I failed to do. What I learned to do too late. What I'm asking you to do now. The funeral ended. People came up to me afterward, said they were moved, said they'd never thought about it that way, said they'd be more aware, more compassionate, more willing to see homeless people as human. Several people said they had their own family secrets, their own relatives they'd hidden, their own shame about family members who were homeless or addicted or mentally ill. Said my story had made them think, made them reconsider, made them want to do better, want to acknowledge family, want to stop hiding people they loved out of shame or fear of judgment. One woman told me her brother was homeless, living in another city, schizophrenic like Thomas. She'd cut off contact years ago, had been ashamed, had told people he was dead, had erased him from family history exactly like Dad had erased Thomas. She said my story had made her realize what she'd done, made her want to reconnect, want to find her brother, want to acknowledge him, want to be family again, want to stop hiding him out of shame. A man told me his son was an addict, living on the streets. He'd disowned him, had told people he only had 2 children instead of 3, had erased his son from family conversations, from family photos, from family gatherings, had pretended he didn't exist because the addiction was shameful, because having an addict son reflected poorly on him, because people would judge, would question his parenting, would wonder what he'd done wrong. He said my story had made him realize that was wrong, that his son was still his son, still family, still someone who mattered, still someone who deserved acknowledgement, deserved love, deserved family, regardless of the addiction, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the shame. These conversations continued for weeks, people reaching out, sharing their stories, their secrets, their hidden family members, their shame, their realization that hiding people out of shame was wrong, was cruel, was the opposite of what family should do. My father's secret, his 40 years of hiding Thomas, his final letter revealing the truth, had started conversations, had made people reconsider, had made people question their own hiding, their own shame, their own treatment of family members with mental illness or addiction or circumstances that made them uncomfortable. I started volunteering at a homeless shelter, wanted to do more than just visit Thomas, wanted to help more broadly, wanted to serve meals, provide clothes, offer kindness, treat homeless people with dignity, show them they mattered, that they were seen, that they were human. The shelter director said volunteers like me were rare. Most volunteers were young people, students, people building resumes, people doing it for college applications or job experience. Older people who'd had personal connections were uncommon, were valuable, brought perspective, brought understanding, brought compassion that came from learning hard lessons. I brought my children to volunteer, wanted them to meet homeless people, wanted them to hear stories, wanted them to understand that circumstances could happen to anyone, that mental illness and addiction and trauma and bad luck didn't discriminate, that the people eating in the shelter had histories, had families, had been normal once, had been like us before things fell apart, wanted my children to learn early what I'd learned late, that everyone deserves dignity, that appearances don't tell the whole story, that you can't judge people based on circumstances, that kindness matters more than judgment. My daughter asked one man at the shelter how he'd ended up homeless. The man said he'd been a teacher, had taught high school for 20 years. Then his wife died, car accident, sudden, traumatic. He'd fallen apart, started drinking, lost his job, lost his house, lost everything, ended up on the streets. That had been 8 years ago. He'd been trying to get back, trying to get sober, trying to get stable, trying to rebuild, but it was hard. Once you're homeless, everything becomes harder. Getting a job without an address, getting housing without income, getting income without housing. The cycle was vicious, was difficult to break, kept people trapped. My son asked if the man regretted what happened. The man said every day, said he regretted the drinking, regretted letting grief consume him, regretted the choices that led here, but said he couldn't change the past, could only try to change the future, try to get better, try to get stable, try to get back to something resembling normal. He was in recovery now, 60 days sober, had a caseworker, had a plan, had hope, but also had realistic understanding of how hard it would be, how long it would take, how many obstacles remained. I asked what would help, what people like me could do. The man said don't judge, said that's the biggest thing. Don't look at homeless people with disgust. Don't treat them as less than human. Don't assume you know their story. Don't assume they deserve their circumstances. Just show basic kindness, basic dignity. Acknowledge they exist. Acknowledge they're human. That matters more than money, more than food, more than anything material. Being seen as human, being treated with dignity, being shown respect. That's what homeless people need most, what they get least, what makes the biggest difference. That conversation stuck with me, reminded me of Thomas, of how I'd treated him at the funeral, of how I'd looked at him with disgust, of how I'd wanted him removed, of how I'd failed to see him as human, failed to show basic dignity, failed to treat him with respect, failed the simplest test, the test of basic human decency, the test of seeing someone as a person regardless of appearances, regardless of circumstances, regardless of how uncomfortable they made me. I visited Thomas's spot under the bridge sometimes, the place where he'd lived for years, where Dad had visited him every week, where we'd found him after the funeral, where he'd spent his final months before dying in the hospital. Someone else was living there now, different homeless person, different story, same spot, same concrete, same bridge, same circumstances. I left flowers there once, for Thomas, for the 42 years he'd spent homeless, for the 40 years Dad had hidden him, for the shame that had kept him secret, for the mental illness that had stolen his life, for the system that had failed him, for the family that had erased him, for all of it. Flowers seemed inadequate, seemed like too little, but it was something, some acknowledgement, some memorial, some recognition that Thomas had existed, had mattered, had been human, had been family, had deserved better than he got. A year after Thomas died, I received a letter from a man I didn't know. He said he'd been homeless with Thomas, had known him for 20 years, had been his friend on the streets, said Thomas had talked about me, about Dad, about family, about the visits, about being hidden, about understanding why, about forgiving, about accepting, about not blaming. Said Thomas had been a good man, a kind man, a man who'd helped other homeless people, who'd shared food, who'd looked out for others, who'd been community on the streets. The letter said Thomas had told him about the funeral, about showing up, about delivering the letter, about being judged, about being treated poorly, but also about the 6 months after, about the visits, about being acknowledged, about being family, about how much it had meant, about how it had changed his final months, had given him connection, had given him family, had given him acknowledgement, had made him feel seen, feel valued, feel like he mattered. The letter said Thomas had died happy, had died knowing family cared, knowing he wasn't forgotten, knowing he'd been acknowledged, knowing he'd mattered. That was worth more than 40 years of hiding, more than a lifetime of shame, more than anything. Thomas had died knowing he was family, knowing he was loved, knowing he mattered. I cried reading that letter, cried for Thomas, cried for Dad, cried for the 40 years of secrecy, cried for the lessons learned too late, cried for the cruelty of judgment, cried for the power of shame, cried for everything, but also felt grateful. Grateful we'd had those 6 months, grateful we'd acknowledged Thomas, grateful we'd been family, grateful he'd died knowing he mattered, grateful the hiding had stopped, grateful the truth had come out, grateful Dad had written that letter, grateful Thomas had delivered it, grateful for the hard lesson, the painful truth, the understanding that came from failure and shame and learning too late. I keep Dad's letter in my desk. Read it sometimes. Remember the lesson. Remember Thomas. Remember the homeless man at the funeral who was family, who was someone I'd judged, someone I'd dismissed, someone I'd treated with cruelty, someone who deserved better. Remember that everyone has a story. Everyone has a history. Everyone has circumstances that brought them to where they are. Remember not to judge, not to assume, not to treat people as less than human based on appearances, based on circumstances, based on comfort or discomfort. Remember to show kindness, show dignity, show basic human decency. Remember that homeless people, are human, are someone's family, are someone's Thomas, are someone who matters even if they seem to matter to no one. A homeless man showed up at my father's funeral. I judged him. I was disgusted by him. I wanted him removed. Then I learned he was my uncle, my father's brother, a man hidden for 40 years out of shame, a man who'd been family all along, a man I'd been cruel to without knowing, without understanding, without seeing past appearances. I learned the hardest lesson of my life that day. Learned that you can't judge books by covers, can't judge people by circumstances, can't assume appearances tell the whole story. Learned that everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves to be seen as human. I learned it too late to treat Thomas the way he deserved the first time I met him, but I learned it in time to do better, to be better, to acknowledge him, to be family, to show him he mattered. That's what I'm passing on. That's the lesson. That's the story. Don't judge. Don't assume. Don't be cruel. Show kindness. Show dignity. See people as human. You don't know their story. Don't know what brought them there. Don't know who they are underneath the circumstances. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Give them basic human decency. Give them what Thomas deserved, what everyone deserves, what we all need to remember to give. Did you like my story? Let's meet in the comments. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next story with love and respect.